Texas is fighting back against a major land grab. It's July 19th, 2024, and these are your headlines. It's hard to believe it's Friday, putting a cap on a very busy week, and who knows what's going to happen this weekend. Maybe Biden will drop out this weekend. That's what they're talking about. Do you think that Joe Biden will drop out this weekend? Let me know in the comments. But we've got some news related to Texas as the federal government puts private land along the Texas-New Mexico border in the crosshairs of acquisition. Current and former lawmakers from both states are uniting against the land grab. The Land Protection Plan aims to seize 700,000 acres of private land in the southern High Plains region and put it under federal control. It was finalized by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service earlier this year. The plan's also part of the Biden administration's 30 by 30 initiative, which they've since rebranded, that aims to federalize 30% of the country's land and oceans by the year 2030. In early July, Representative Jody Arrington sent a letter to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service expressing his concerns about the Biden administration's efforts to subdue private land under federal control in the name of conservation. And his letter highlights the concerns of his constituents, including how the land grab will affect property values and taxation, whether or not the plan will cap economic growth, and what oversight processes the plan will have. Meanwhile, in our New Mexico friends to the west, former U.S. Representative Yvette Harrell authored an op-ed explaining that the land grab expansion circumvents not only congressional authority, but also private property owners and local governments who have been excluded from the process. Harrell, who's a Republican, argues that the land grab will have devastating consequences. In response, American Stewards of Liberty is hosting a landowners meeting in Littlefield, Texas on July 25th. The nonprofit property rights organization says that the key to stopping the federal land grab is to educate the grassroots about the problem. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has formed a special committee in the Texas Senate to review electric companies' preparedness and responses to Hurricane Beryl. Patrick revealed that Senator Charles Schwertner will chair the committee, which is to investigate the delayed response of some electric utility giants in southeast Texas. Lieutenant Governor Patrick said Texans are rightfully upset with the overwhelming failure of electric utility companies to restore power in a timely fashion. The electric utility company's failure cannot be tolerated, especially when it was so obvious a storm was headed toward Texas. Now, in addition to Schwertner, the committee will include Senators Phil King as vice chairman and Carol Alvarado, Paul Betancourt, Brandon Creighton, Juan Hinojosa, Joan Huffman, Lois Kolkhorst, Morgan LaMontia, Mace Middleton, Boris Miles, Robert Nichols, and Judith Zaffarini. A big committee. News of the committee comes the same week that Governor Greg Abbott revealed that he's ordered the Public Utilities Commission to undertake a rigorous study on whether one of the region's biggest electricity providers, CenterPoint, cut corners in its preparedness before Beryl to increase its profit. At the peak of the storm, around 2.7 million individuals lost power, while CenterPoint claimed that it restored power to around 2 million shortly after the hurricane subsided. Hundreds of thousands of Houston area residents were still without power a week later. Perhaps you were one of them.
Why get your news from people who don't share your values? Get news stories from Texas Scorecard. We provide real news for real Texans. Go to texasscorecard.com today.
Last up, a new report released by the Texas Public Policy Foundation seeks higher standards for all cases involving the efforts of Child Protective Services to preserve and reunite Texas families, not just those of Native American children. See, TPPF says that under the current law, CPS has to follow special standards when working with children who are members of a Native American tribe compared to children who aren't. Specifically, CPS, in conjunction with the Department of Family and Protective Services, applies active efforts when working with Native American children under the Indian Child Welfare Act. And these active efforts are clearly defined standards allowing for more resources to preserve and reunite those children with family or tribal communities. Some examples of active efforts include taking steps necessary to keep siblings together and identifying appropriate services and helping the parents to overcome barriers, including actively assisting the parents in obtaining such services. Additional active efforts focus on assisting the child's parents or extended family in accessing housing, financial, transportation, mental health, substance abuse, and peer support services. In contrast, CPS allows for reasonable efforts when working with non-Native American children and families. And while Arkansas considers reasonable efforts to include vague services described as childcare or family therapy, TPPF research says that Texas doesn't have a working definition of reasonable efforts or a list of services, which causes problems for state courts and child protection agencies. For more of today's stories, go to texasscorecard.com.